I never meant to notice her. That sounds strange, but it's true. Most nights, I kept my head down, ordered the same burnt coffee from the corner cafe, and scrolled through messages I never sent. The cafe wasn't anything special, fluorescent lights buzzing, cracked leather booths, the same 4 songs looping on the old stereo. But it was open late, and I liked that it didn't ask anything of me. She sat 2 tables over, always. A woman in her 40s, maybe mid, though the kind of mid-40s that carried itself like armor. Dark hair tied up carelessly, sleeves pushed back as if she had no patience for appearances. I thought she was grading papers at first, or balancing accounts, because her pen was always in motion. But later I realized she just wrote. Lists maybe. Notes no one else would read. The first time she looked up at me, I froze. Just a flick of her eyes over the rim of her cup, and then she went back to writing. I tried to act normal, flipping my phone over on the table, as if it held anything worth looking at. My thumb hovered above a half-written text I drafted to my ex weeks ago. Never sent, never deleted. I couldn't bring myself to erase it, but I couldn't finish it either. That's how my nights went. Coffee cooling, silence stretching, words stuck somewhere between thought and action. One night, the barista got my order wrong, slid a black coffee onto my table instead of my usual latte drowned in sugar. I stared at it like it was a test. Before I could get up, her voice broke through. "You don't strike me as a black coffee guy," she said without looking up. Her tone was flat, observational, almost dry. Still, it made me laugh, quietly. "That obvious?" She finally glanced at me, pen paused mid-word. "You've ordered the same thing for 3 weeks. Extra syrup. 2 sugars." I blinked, caught off guard. "You noticed that?" She gave the faintest shrug, like it didn't matter. Hard not to. Then she bent her head again, as if the conversation had already ended. But something about the way her hand curled loosely around her cup stayed with me. The slight tremor when she set it back down. Details I shouldn't have cared about, but did. After that, our exchanges stayed small. A nod when we arrived. A quiet joke about the cafe's terrible playlist. Once, she slid the sugar jar across to me without asking, her eyes flicking up just long enough to make me forget the next word I was going to say. And me, I kept pretending to type on my phone, though the screen stayed blank. Sometimes I'd scroll up to that unsent message, read it all over again, and stop just before the end. I don't know if it was loneliness, or habit, or both, but I knew I looked forward to those nights more than I wanted to admit. Last Thursday, she packed up earlier than usual. She slipped her notebook into a worn leather bag, pushed her chair in with a deliberate scrape. I thought she'd just leave like always, with that small nod we'd built into our routine. Instead, as she walked past my table, her phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced at the screen, frowned, then muttered under her breath, something like, "Too late for that." When she looked up at me, there was hesitation, as if she'd almost said more. But she didn't. She just gave the smallest, tired smile, and left. I watched her disappear into the dark street outside, my coffee untouched, my phone still blank. A minute later, the screen lit up. A new text. From my wife. And that was the night everything shifted. The next time I saw her, the air already felt different. Maybe it was me, carrying the weight of that late-night text from my wife, the one that had landed like a stone in still water. "We need to talk." Just 4 words, but heavy enough that I hadn't slept. She was already there, hunched over her notebook, steam rising from her cup. The chair across from her was empty, and without thinking, I slid into it instead of my usual spot 2 tables away. She looked up, surprised, eyebrows raised, but she didn't tell me to move. "You're early," she said, closing the notebook halfway. I gave a half-smile. "Couldn't stay in tonight." We sat like that for a while, the hum of the cafe machines filling in the silence. I traced a circle on my cup lid with my thumb, then said, "Do you always write?" Her shoulders rose and fell. "Not always. Just when the house feels too quiet." I wanted to ask more, but she was already turning her pen over in her fingers, staring at it like it had betrayed her. Finally, she said, "I used to write lists for my daughter when she was little. Groceries, chores, things to keep the world from falling apart. I guess I never broke the habit." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. The word daughter caught somewhere in my chest. The way she said it, like a fact, but with edges softened over time. My mom used to do that too, I heard myself saying. Lists on sticky notes. Half of them didn't even make sense to anyone else. She smiled faintly, the first real one I'd seen from her. Maybe it's a mom thing. The conversation drifted from there. She told me about her job, something administrative, nothing she loved, but steady. I told her I was working freelance now, though I skipped over the part about it not paying much. There was comfort in trading small truths, even if they weren't the whole story. Still, underneath, something uneasy pressed at me. Every time her hand brushed near mine on the table, I pulled back a little too quickly. Every time she looked directly at me, I felt like a fraud. She didn't know I went home to a wife I barely spoke to anymore, that our nights ended in silence broken only by the buzz of unanswered texts. At one point, she leaned back, eyes narrowing just slightly. "You're younger than I thought," she said. I laughed nervously. That a bad thing? Not bad. She tilted her head, studying me. Just unexpected. Her gaze lingered longer than it should have, and I found myself gripping the paper sleeve around my cup until it tore. We shifted the subject quickly after that. Talked about music, about the cafe's endless loop of the same tired playlist. She joked about sneaking in her own mix, and for a moment, it felt light again. But when she stood to leave, she hesitated, glancing down at my cup. "Next time, you should try tea. Easier on the nerves." It was nothing, just a suggestion. Yet the way her hand brushed the edge of my sleeve as she passed made it feel like more. A brief, almost accidental touch, but one that carried warmth long after she'd gone. I sat there, staring at the torn sleeve between my fingers, and thought. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The following week, I didn't see her at all. My chair stayed empty, nights stretched long. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter, but the absence gnawed. Even the barista noticed. "Your friend not coming tonight?" he asked casually. I muttered something about her being busy and left early. When she finally showed up again, it was different. She waved me over this time, tapping the seat across from her. "You vanished," she said, almost accusing. "I thought you vanished," I replied, and we both laughed quietly, though there was tension underneath. She ordered tea for me without asking, pushed the cup toward me. "See? Better." I sipped, burning my tongue, trying not to show it. She smirked, catching the wince. That small flicker of humor opened something between us, and soon we were talking again. Nothing important, just noise to fill the spaces that might have been too heavy otherwise. But then, midway through, she grew quiet. Her gaze drifted to the window, where rain had started to streak down the glass. "People see us, you know," she said softly. I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Just a younger man, an older woman. It looks like something." Her words lingered in the air, heavy. I didn't answer right away. I noticed her fingers tightening around the handle of her cup, knuckles pale. My throat went dry. "I don't care what people think," I said finally. She turned to me then, eyes searching, as if testing how much I meant it. But before she could respond, the bell above the cafe door rang. Someone walked in, her daughter maybe? No, just a friend, waving cheerfully at her. Still, the moment shattered. She straightened, pulled back into herself. Conversation after that was clipped. Short sentences. Safe topics. I watched her tuck her hair behind her ear, avoiding my gaze, and felt something slipping away. As we stood to leave, I almost reached for her hand. My fingers brushed the air near hers, and stopped. She looked up, as if she'd felt the almost touch. For a second, the space between us narrowed to nothing. Rain outside, silence inside, her eyes holding mine. Then she stepped back. Just enough. And I thought, we were so close to saying something we couldn't take back. The rain hadn't stopped all week. Nights blurred together, and for some reason, the cafe felt smaller when she was there. She was sitting by the window again, stirring her tea even though the bag was already discarded on the saucer. When I sat across from her, she didn't smile, not even the faint one she usually gave. "You're late," she said. I shrugged. "Work." It wasn't work. I'd been circling the block, debating whether to even walk in. She leaned back, studying me, lips pressed thin. Then, you ever think about what this looks like? The words caught me off guard. What do you mean? Her eyes flicked to the tables around us. The barista wiping down counters, a couple in the corner whispering. People talk. Or they might. I laughed, but it came out awkward. It's just coffee. Is it? She tilted her head, waiting. I didn't answer. Couldn't. My hands stayed folded on the table, thumbs pressing against each other hard enough to hurt. We sat like that, silence stretching too long. She reached for her cup, and our fingers almost touched. Almost. She pulled back quickly, wrapping her hand around the porcelain like a shield. Before either of us could say more, the bell above the door jingled. A man walked in, someone her age. He waved at her, casual, familiar. She stiffened, waved back just enough, then looked down at the table. Friend? I asked. My voice was too careful. Neighbor, she said flatly. And then, softer, he'll tell people he saw me here. Something inside me tightened. Does it matter? She met my eyes, steady but guarded. It might. After that, the conversation stumbled. We talked about nothing. The rain, the cafe's leaking roof, the price of groceries. Every word felt like a diversion, a way to not step closer. But the air between us wouldn't quiet. I watched her tuck her hair behind her ear, the gesture small, almost nervous. She caught me looking and held my gaze a second too long. I imagined reaching across, just brushing my fingers over hers. I imagined her not pulling away. The thought was so vivid I almost acted on it. My hand shifted, just barely, before I stopped. She noticed. I know she did. Her breath hitched, small, sharp. I should go, she whispered, pushing her chair back. But she didn't stand. She stayed there, hands resting on the edge of the table, eyes locked on mine. The space between us felt like it was collapsing, narrowing to a point that could tip either way. If I leaned forward, just an inch, but I didn't. Neither did she. We just sat there, suspended in that almost, until the barista called out a new order too loudly, and the moment broke. She grabbed her bag, quick, like pulling away from a fire. Good night, she said without looking at me. And I was left staring at the empty chair, heart still racing. Knowing we'd almost crossed into something we couldn't undo, we ended up walking together by accident. Or maybe not. She'd left the cafe just ahead of me, umbrella tilted against the drizzle, and I fell into step beside her before I thought better of it. The street was quiet, just wet pavement, the hum of tires somewhere in the distance, the occasional hiss of rain sliding off the gutters. She didn't tell me to go away. That felt like permission. Long day? I asked, trying to sound casual. Always, she said. Her voice was soft, not tired exactly, but weighted. We walked without talking for a block. I noticed the way she kept her umbrella tilted slightly toward me, though I wasn't carrying one. A small thing, easy to miss, but not nothing. At the park, she paused near a bench. The wood was damp, but she sat anyway, smoothing her skirt beneath her. I hesitated, then sat too, keeping a careful inch of distance. The air smelled of wet grass, sharp and clean. She folded her hands in her lap. You don't say much about yourself, she said suddenly. I stared at the slick path ahead. Not much to say. That's not true. I didn't answer. I kept my eyes on the path, watching a runner in the distance splash through a puddle. But something in me shifted. My wife texted me last week. I said quietly, almost to myself. Her head turned, slowly. I didn't look at her. What did she say? I rubbed at the damp sleeve of my jacket. That we needed to talk. That she was tired of whatever this is we've been calling a marriage. There was silence after that. Long enough that I finally risked a glance at her. Her expression was unreadable, calm, almost too calm. I shouldn't have told you that, I said quickly. Forget it. But she shook her head. No. I asked. The rain softened, more mist than drops now. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, pressing my hands together. I don't know why I keep coming to that cafe. It's not the coffee. It's not the music. I think it's just that I don't feel invisible there. Her breath caught. I heard it. She looked down at her hands, twisting the ring on her finger. No, not a wedding ring, just a thin band worn down over time. You shouldn't say things like that, she whispered. Why not? Because. She finally looked at me. eyes sharp but glistening. Because I'll believe you. The words hung between us, exposed, raw. I wanted to say something, anything to pull them back, but nothing came. My throat was tight. We sat there, the rain easing off, the night growing heavier around us. She shifted slightly closer, not much, but enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her shoulder. I don't know what you want from me, she said finally. The truth sat right on the edge of my tongue. You. Just you. But I bit it back, teeth pressing hard enough that it hurt. Instead, I said, I don't know either. Her eyes searched mine, as if waiting for me to give something more. When I didn't, she exhaled shakily, almost a laugh, almost a sigh. Do you ever think about? She started, then stopped. About what? Her gaze dropped to my hands, then back to my face. She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't have to. The question hung in the damp air, unanswered, and maybe unanswerable. For a moment, I thought I might reach for her. Just close that last inch of distance, let whatever was teetering between us finally fall. But I didn't. She didn't. We stayed there, on that wet bench under the dim streetlight, both of us silent, both of us carrying words we weren't ready to say. And the night ended on a question neither of us asked out loud. She didn't come to the cafe for 3 nights straight. At first, I told myself it was nothing. People get busy. People stay home when it rains. But by the 4th night, the silence felt pointed. The corner table by the window, her usual spot, stayed empty. I still ordered tea like she'd suggested, even though it tasted flat without her there. The barista asked once, offhand, she on vacation or something? I shrugged, pretended I didn't care. But I did. On the 5th night, I walked by her building. Just walked, telling myself it was coincidence. The stairwell light was on, faint yellow through the frosted glass. I almost buzzed, almost climbed the steps 2 at a time. Instead, I kept walking, hands shoved in my pockets. The next evening, she was there. Same table, same notebook, as if nothing had happened. But when I slid into the chair across from her, she barely looked up. You disappeared, I said carefully. So did you, she replied, eyes on her page. I blinked. I was here. Every night. Her pen stopped moving. For a moment, her expression faltered, like she hadn't expected that answer. Then she set the pen down and folded her hands. I needed space. From what? Her gaze lifted to mine, steady. From you. The words landed hard, heavier than I was ready for. I forced a nod, staring at the tea cooling in front of me. She softened then, just slightly. It's not you. She exhaled. My daughter's back. She saw me leaving the cafe and asked questions I wasn't ready to answer. I looked down, picking at the cardboard sleeve of my cup until it tore. She's grown. 21. A pause. About your age. The air thinned between us. I couldn't tell if she meant it as a warning, a line, or something else. We didn't talk much after that. Just sat there, 2 people pretending to be strangers again. But the distance felt unnatural, like wearing clothes that didn't fit anymore. When she stood to leave, I thought about stopping her, about saying something reckless and honest. But the words jammed in my throat. Instead, I watched her walk out, the door swinging shut behind her. Later, lying in bed, I stared at my phone. A blank message thread stared back. I typed, I missed you this week. Then deleted it. Typed, do you want me to stop coming? Deleted that too. Finally, I settled on nothing. Just the blinking cursor, waiting. The next day, I didn't go to the cafe. I told myself I was giving her space. The day after that, I stayed home again. Each night stretched wider, heavier. By the 3rd night, my phone buzzed with another message from my wife. Short, clipped, practical. When can we talk? I left it unanswered. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. And somewhere, her chair by the window sat empty too that I hadn't planned to see her again. That's what I told myself, at least. Stay away. Let the silence do the work. But silence doesn't solve anything. It just builds pressure. It was late when I found myself outside her building. The street was quiet, most windows dark. Her stairwell light glowed faintly, the way it always did. I stood there too long, debating whether to knock, when the door opened. She stepped out, holding a trash bag, stopped short when she saw me. We stared at each other, both caught. She looked tired, hair loose, no armor tonight. You weren't at the cafe, she said. I know. My voice sounded rougher than I meant. She set the bag down, folding her arms. So why are you here? I didn't have a clean answer. I don't know. I thought maybe. My words trailed off. Her expression shifted, part guarded, part something else. She sighed and gestured toward the stairwell. Come inside. Just for a minute. Her apartment was small, neat, but lived in. Books stacked on the coffee table, a half-folded blanket on the couch. She moved toward the kitchen, filled the kettle without asking. I stood awkwardly in the doorway, feeling like I'd broken some rule. You don't owe me anything, she said, not looking at me. I know. She turned, finally meeting my eyes. Then why are you here? I swallowed hard. My hands were in fists at my sides. Because when you disappeared, it felt like something was missing, and I didn't like it. She froze, one hand resting on the counter. The kettle began to hum softly, the only sound in the room. That's not fair, she said after a long pause. I'm not trying to be fair. Her shoulders sagged. She switched off the kettle, leaving it untouched. Then she walked over and sat on the couch. After a beat, she nodded at the empty cushion beside her. I sat, careful not to sit too close, but close enough to feel the weight of her presence. I don't know what this is, she admitted, voice low. And it scares me. Me too. She gave a humorless laugh. You're too young to be scared of this. That's not true, I said quickly. Then, softer. I'm scared of ruining things I didn't know I needed. Her hands twisted in her lap. For a long moment, she said nothing. I could hear the faint tick of a clock on the wall, the hum of the fridge. Then, without looking at me, she said, my daughter asked if I was seeing someone. I held my breath. I told her no, she continued. And technically, I wasn't lying. But her voice cracked just slightly. I thought of you. The room felt too small. My chest tight, my palms damp. I wanted to reach for her, but didn't. Instead, I let the words come, quiet and raw. When I'm with you, I don't feel like I'm disappearing. Her head turned then, eyes wet but steady. She studied me for a long time, as if weighing the risk. And then she reached out, just barely, her fingertips brushing against mine. The gentlest touch, nothing more. But it felt like everything. We sat there, neither pulling away. Okay, she whispered. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't a promise. It was small, human, fragile. But it was real. And for the first time in weeks, the silence between us didn't feel unbearable. It didn't happen all at once. Nothing between us ever did. Some weeks we didn't meet at all, both of us circling our own obligations, her daughter visiting, my wife's last text still unanswered, and then, finally, not sent again. Other weeks we found ourselves back at the cafe, sliding into the same chairs like no time had passed. By then, I'd stopped ordering the syrupy latte. Tea had become my default, though every now and then I'd ask for black coffee, just to make her smile. We weren't reckless about it. No late-night declarations, no drama. Just small, steady things. Walking home together after closing time. Sharing a bench on damp mornings when the world still smelled like rain. Passing her daughter on the street once, both of us pretending we were just neighbors, and both of us knowing she saw through it. She didn't ask about my wife again, and I didn't offer. But the absence of that weight gave us room. A different kind of quiet. One morning, 8:47 a.m., I remember because she checked her watch. I stopped by her apartment before work. She was standing in the doorway, hair loose, holding a thermos. She pressed it into my hand. Tea, she said, almost shy. I carried it with me all day, not because I needed the drink, but because it felt like carrying part of her. And that's how it built, piece by piece. The world didn't shift dramatically. It just softened. We found a rhythm. She kept writing in her notebook. Sometimes she let me read a line or two. Lists, fragments, half-thoughts. Once, scribbled at the top of a page, she'd written, "Remember, he doesn't vanish when the night ends." She laughed when I pointed at it, tried to brush it off as nothing. But I kept that line in my head. Months passed. The cafe redecorated, changed the playlist, swapped out the cracked booths for new ones that smelled too much like plastic. But we stayed. Different corner, same tea, same easy silences. I don't think either of us would call it love in the way people usually mean. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't declarations in the rain. It was steadier, quieter, two lives that had learned how to carry weight on their own, choosing, finally, to share it. The bench in the park became ours. Even when the wood was damp, we sat anyway, shoulders brushing just enough. She'd bring a thermos. I'd tear at the cardboard sleeve of my cup, same nervous habit, and she'd nudge me for it, smiling. It wasn't perfect. We still had gaps, silences that stretched too far, days we didn't understand each other. But there was warmth threaded through now, a groundedness. One evening, as the sun dropped low and the air smelled of wet grass again, she turned to me on that bench and said, "Funny how it started with the wrong coffee." I laughed quiet. Best mistake they ever made. We didn't need more than that. I don't know if anyone else would call it a love story, but I think she would. And so would I. Because in the end, we didn't vanish. We stayed.